It seems to be popular right now to bash the new Netflix cartoon Disenchantment. So being a contrarian cynical hipster who typically takes the other side in the argument because it's cool to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, and yes, that is literally the only reason I do it, yes comment section, you're right. So I'll come out and say it, I think the opposite of what almost everyone seems to think about Disenchantment. That being, I was never really that interested to begin with, didn't think it was going to be all that great, and came out of it thinking, yeah, it was alright. It almost seemed like a joke when I first heard of it. It almost sounded like it was entirely conceived because Matt and his team just wanted to make a show, any show. So we did Futurama, that was a parody of sci-fi. What's like the opposite of sci-fi? Traditional fantasy. Should we basically do Futurama but with traditional fantasy? Okay, so Matt Groening does trad fantasy. So there's this fantasy princess, right? But she's like not what you'd expect, yeah? She drinks and is basically Bender. Wow, I never would have expected that. My expectations have been totally subverted. Of course, this is me constructing a wildly cynical and hyperbolic backstory for the show. The strong likelihood is that Matt wanted to do it, he has enough clout to do it, and therefore he did it. But looking at the reaction to it, it makes it even more obvious why J.K. Rowling started writing crime novels under a pseudonym. Because when someone's that famous and has that track record, people are going to go into it with that track record in mind first and foremost. The hype for Disenchantment didn't seem to be based on the idea for the show. People seem to just go in going, oh my god, the people behind the Simpsons and Futurama making a new animated show. This will be great! Rather than going, oh my god, an animated parody of traditional fantasy. This is an entirely novel idea that will lead to many highly amusing scenarios that I've never seen played out time and time again. I am wrong about a lot of things, but I am fairly confident in saying that if this had anyone else's name on it, nowhere near as many people would have either cared or bothered. And here's the thing, it wasn't the show that did that. Look at this poster, it doesn't even have Matt's name on it. I mean, yes, everyone knows The Simpsons, but it's not even written in The Simpsons font, and it's quite small. But your eyes were drawn to it, weren't they? And yes, admittedly it's done in the same animation style, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the new Simpsons or Futurama. It was us that went into it with the incredibly high expectations and wanting this to be the Matt Groening's third cartoon that we had in our heads and to make us feel how the Simpsons and Futurama did. When, stop a second, look at it. Was this ever likely to be anything other than what it is? The whole setup with Bean in the first few episodes is a bit played out and obvious. Her father wants to arrange a marriage for her so he can forge alliances, and she doesn't want to. She wants to go out partying and drinking. I mean, Game of Thrones is now 7 years old, and so are the jokes about people being forced to marry for strange reasons in medieval fantasy. It's kinda just what I'd expect of a Matt Groening animated comedy about a rebellious princess. The introductory story with Elfo is a bit predictable too, but I did appreciate that a lot more. So he's an elf who lives among perfectly happy magical elves, but he's sick of constant happiness and longs for a place where people are miserable. It's reminiscent of Matt's days drawing his comic strip Life in Hell. It's got a dark and nihilistic worldview, but it's silly and offbeat enough not to be too depressing, and that's the Matt Groening that people know and love. His sense of humour is charming, but downcast. And upon leaving his elf society and reaching the outside world, there's some really sharp writing with Elfo's silly perspective clashing with cold hard reality, and it made me laugh on quite a few occasions. I know some people find him annoying, but I have an annoying sense of humour, so that's probably why I like him. I think he's a decent fish out of water character. Oh hey, look at that, Elf is a fish out of water character, that's been done before as well. The third character, Lucy the Demon, shows up to act as the literal devil on Bean's shoulder to Elfo's angel. He's easily the funnest and most interesting character. He's cool and cynical and ruthless, and there to stir shit, and his voice and character basically reminded me of Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I was left a bit cold and bemused by the first 10 minutes of episode 1, but I did start warming to it by the time all the characters had met each other and I could see the format beginning to take shape, because while it is a long and well-trodden path in sitcoms, combine a small selection of distinct personalities and you got a setup that allows for a week-in, week-out plot with a lesson, it is a well-trodden path in sitcoms for a reason, and it works especially well in Matt's case. You got Lucy to provide the edge, Elfo to provide the levity, and Bean to be the middle. middle. You add some peripheral characters, have an A story and a B story running, principally featuring any 1, 2 or 3 of characters A, B and C, and a selection of peripheral characters D, E, F, G and H to either mix with principal characters, or to provide their own B story in their own right, repeat ad nauseum, and watch it shit money. Yes, Disenchantment's playing it safe in its construction, but hell, it's only just started, and that is a setup you can work with. Though yes, some of the characterization is more than a little sloppy. Elfo does slip outside of his simplistic upbeat perspective occasionally. A lot of characters' lines could be swapped around as well and you wouldn't notice. The lines between these characters become a bit blurry. Also, in some cases it feels like some of the team are just writing for Bender, Fry and Leela, when Lucy, Elfo and Bean should be a lot more distinct than that based on who they are and what they are. But sloppy doesn't necessarily mean it's always bad. I was invested in all of them, and the plot twists in the last few episodes I did find highly engaging. It was never likely to be a BoJack Horseman situation where it starts out with introduced premise, be a bit safe and play about with it before tearing the mask off and doing bleak and cold introspection. Disenchantment does take some more dramatic turns towards the end of this run of episodes, but not to the same extent of abyss-staring bleakness that Season 1 of BoJack does. While it was never going to be, and probably will never be, as emotionally resonant as that, or make the audience feel anywhere near the same levels of affinity with the characters that early Simpsons and Futurama did, but for all its faults, Disenchantment did enough to get me to like the characters and to get invested. Especially in those last 3 episodes. I was really enjoying Matt's familiar style of comedy as the stakes got raised and we introduced more mythos and lore for this stupid fantasy world. I think one of the biggest mistakes the show's made is the runtime. With episode 1 being 36 minutes and all the others averaging out at 28, it can start to feel a bit flabby and like you could cut some stages of the plots out and not really lose much. That and some bits of episodes 3 through 7 can feel a bit pointless and nothing new at times. I like that unlike The Simpsons and Futurama, Disenchantment's essentially presented as a serial, the central thrust of which being King Zog trying to create the elixir of life with Elfo's blood, and that's building off to the side of each episode's plot about Bean throwing a wild party, or Elfo lying about having a girlfriend. You know, typical sitcom stuff, which is nothing new and can feel a bit throwaway. I found that I enjoyed the show more when it found its focus again and began to act as a proper but silly fantasy quest in episodes 8 through 10, which unfortunately were the episodes that didn't get sent to critics and totally fucked its Metacritic score. Although yes, I am the guy who always says that if you're not enjoying something, you don't have to see it through to the end, so if Disenchantment had pissed you off in episodes 1 through 7 and you gave up, I can't really blame you. But personally I was enjoying it enough and I did feel rewarded by sticking around to the last 3 episodes. Anyway, overall, Disenchantment is nowhere near as good as The Simpsons and Futurama were in their early days, but I didn't expect it to be, and I think it's better than most people are giving it credit for.